Hello everybody, my name is Zen and welcome to my impressions for Civilization 7. Now normally I do first impressions for these videos where I jump in and we do like the first 30 minutes or so of a game and you get my genuine reactions to things that are being presented, whether it be like a tutorial and then just, thereafter and kind of seeing if a game will hook you or not and how good it actually feels right at the start. Because I think that reactions for those kind of games are really important for the first 30 minutes to an hour, but in cases like Civilization 7, that's just not something that is viable. Like, I've only done a few impressions videos where I've gone back and done like a full-on video of it. Elden Ring is one of those, and so is Civilization, because I think Civilization requires many hours of playing to get a good grasp of the mechanics and how everything is working in this particular game. Now, I am a Civilization nerd. I really love the games. I think 5 and 6 really hooked me, and I enjoy the heck out of those. And I really like 4X adjacent games, so things like Humankind or Ara, or what was all of the Endless Legend games and Endless Space and all that. Like those are all freaking fantastic. I love those games. But there's just something that I really like about Civilization, and I tend to jump onto these games and attach myself to certain mechanics that I really like. And when Civilization 7 was announced, those mechanics that I really like were not going to be really there anymore. And I'll talk about that in a moment, but we're going to give my full-on thoughts of all of the different things that happened with Civilization 7 and whether or not I like it. And to be transparent, this video is assuming knowledge that you have over Civilization and what it is. I'm going to briefly describe Civilization in the fact that it is a 4X game. It is a grand strategy game in which you are progressing through history, like humankind history, and by the time you start and finish, you will have gone through all of history. Typically, you could start games somewhere in the middle or towards the end or just do the beginning, and you can mix and match. But the general idea is that you're going to go from the start of human history all the way through to the modern or sometimes future tech on how the history performs and how you go through it. However, you get to mess around with it a little bit. You get to play a civilization. You get to pick like India or Japan or I don't know, Germany, and you get to play through all of Civilization as that civ, and you get special bonuses throughout, special units. For example, in previous games, like the US has had like what were they called? Like outriders, people on like horses, or what was a really good example? I think the Japanese had the Zero when it got to like the World War II stage era, and there's just like cool little units that they pick out, like, hey, this is a cool thing. Rome gets legionnaires, and you get to be able to play as the Romans during that age, and it's typically more powerful when they were powerful in history. And the point of the game is to win, and you could do that by doing several different things, but generally you pick a path, and the path could be like a domination victory, where you just destroy all the other civilizations and you take over their cities and their stuff. There's the economic victory, where you're just trying to make more money than everybody else and be able to purchase things faster than anybody else can. There's the cultural victory, where you're trying to make everybody love you. Sometimes there's also a diplomatic victory. It depends on the game. And then, of course, there's also the scientific victory, where you're just progressing through your tech tree way faster than anybody else. And eventually, in most of these games, you're like trying to get to space. And that's like how it breaks down. And that's pretty normal across most Civ games, modern Civ games. But there are, other 4X games do things slightly different, but just in Civilization, that's genuinely or generally how it all works. Now, there is one thing to note here, which is when you're playing in multiplayer, there's also a social element there to diplomacy between players, just like you would have playing like Settlers of Catan or Twilight Imperium and stuff like that. But when you're playing against the PCs, the computer players, there is diplomatic mechanics there. So you can gain favor or lose favor with the NPCs. They may like you for different reasons or hate you. And there's also ways to trade with them and improve your relationship with them and go to war with them. And there's all of these mechanics that are the foundation of what Civ is and has been for at least the last decade. But then Civilization 7 was announced, and they showed that they were going to change things up a bit. They were going to change a lot of how the main mechanics work or has worked in the past. And honestly, when I saw the announcement, I really didn't like it. I kind of hated it, and I told myself that I probably wouldn't play the game because it changed things so drastically that it kind of took out what I loved about the previous games, or at least what I thought I did. That's to, foreshadow that maybe things changed after I played a bit of this game. We'll talk about that. But the biggest thing that they changed is you're not just going straight through history anymore, starting at the beginning and then going through to modern times. They actually broke the game up into essentially 3 different parts. It starts with the first age, the Antiquity Age, moves to the Exploration Age, and then it goes to the Modern Age. And that may not sound much different than how I've described the game so far, but the way it plays out is significant. Because any time that you switch ages, so you go from the Antiquity Age to the Exploration Age, the game mechanics change, and the game wants you to play a different way. And then on top of that, you're actually changing which civilization you're playing as well. And depending on the things that you did in the previous age, you're unlocking new civilizations to play in the next age. So, for example, you may have done things in the Exploration Age that allows you to play as the United States in the Modern Age, or as, as France in the Modern Age. But when you're playing, during the Antiquity Age, those don't exist. You're not able to play as them. So you're kind of like progressing your civilization as you go. And when I first heard that, I hated that idea because I like the idea of I'm going to be Rome, and I'm going to play Rome all the way through from the Stone Age all the way to the Modern Age. And that is who I'm going to be. But the way that they've changed things around with this, it kind of felt like it felt odd that you're changing civilizations as the ages progress. However, you only do it twice, right? You do it from the Antiquity to the Exploration, and from Exploration to Modern. But because they've done that, they've also decoupled leaders. So leaders were basically the leader of whatever civilization you were going to play. If you're playing Rome, it was going to be Caesar a lot of the time. But if you're not playing as a specific leader in this game, and they've decoupled that, then you can kind of make whatever leaders they want. So in previous Civ games, it was usually the people that you would expect to be a leader of that civilization. If it was the United States, it was like Theodore Roosevelt or something like that. But now they don't have to go with all of the crazy big names. You don't have to play as Gandhi if you're playing India. And they've added a lot of random leaders in there that are actually kind of cool. Like genuinely really, really cool leaders. Like Harriet Tubman is in there. And then there's like Xerxes for Persia, which is what I was playing in the background for my game. And it's just kind of cool to have like all of these, it's a hodgepodge of different leaders that you're able to grab and play, and then you pair up with different civilizations. Some pair up better than others, but you're able to kind of play whatever leader you want with that civilization that you want as you start in that age. And no, you don't change leaders as you go through the ages. You stay the same leader once you've started a game. So you kind of got to pick a way to play right off the bat, which is kind of a normal thing for Civilization. You're all, am I going to do a scientific victory or whatever? And I'm going to try to pair up my leader with that. But by being able to change leaders in the middle of the ages, civilizations in the middle of the ages, it means that you actually have a way to pivot your strategy. And I've noticed that the CPU does this, the computer enemies, they tend to do this. Like, they will be one way and then they'll pivot. And then in the next age, maybe in the first age, they were really friendly because they shared like same ideologies as you and whatnot. But when the age changes to the exploration age, suddenly they're your enemies because they don't like that you are doing a certain thing. The leaders have expectations of other leaders. For instance, there was one that was like, they like the player who has the least amount of artifacts, but they hate the player who has the most amount of artifacts because they're like trying to go with a cultural victory thing. But then there's other things that they may like when you get to the modern age, if you share government styles, like, are you communism or are you capitalist? And it's just like a hodgepodge of a bunch of different stuff within the game as you've progressed through the ages determines whether or not a PC is going to like you. And you can always adjust that by trading with them, giving them stuff, and playing the diplomatic game. But as a default, they're going to like you or hate you based on different things that you do or do not share with them. And I think whether or not I've liked or disliked the new age mechanic, it really comes down to how they've done the victory conditions. And I think this is the perfect time to jump in and discuss the changes to them. And they're all positive, I might add, mostly positive, which is that it's kind of more like a quest log. So you start the game and it's like all leaders and civilizations, they have like tags. So it could be like an economic expansionist. It's always 2 tags, or like a warring like scientific thing where they're pairing up 2 of the conditions there to play with each other. And when you pick these things, you can kind of figure out how you're going to play, or it gives you a starting point for how you're going to play that particular civilization combo with your leader. And at the beginning, I started with Xerxes and I wanted to do an economic victory. I really, really like scientific victories, but I feel like when I'm jumping into a Civ game now for the first time, I like to do the economic thing because it gives me a lot of flexibility with how I play. If I'm starting the game and I'm just making a lot of money, and then all of a sudden I decide, you know what, I don't want to do that, I actually just want to do a scientific victory, it means I can pivot really easy to those things. And if I want to do a domination victory, then I can just buy a bunch of units, right? So I've been starting with economic victories, and that's what I did here with Xerxes, and I did Persia, and I was making an insane amount of money in the first age, and I was really, really enjoying that. And it popped up right as soon as I started, like, hey, how do you want to play? And it said, like, you get an economic advisor or a scientific advisor, and you get to choose one of them, and then it will start pinning your objectives. It'll say, like, you have to do this certain thing. You have to research this certain tech or the certain civic and be able to get far enough down the tree and then do this other thing. Like, for example, the one of the ones for the economic victory was like setting up a specific amount of trade routes. But the fact that you can easily just click on the screen to see between the ages, which is the top left little icon with the sand dial, and each of the ages show what progression they're at, and depending on how many people have finished certain stages of their victory conditions, it will progress the age faster. So you just kind of keep an eye on the percentage, and you get a pretty good idea of when that particular age will end. But when you go into that menu, you can see your progress so far and what you've done and the stuff that you still need to do. And you can kind of click ahead and see, like, what am I going to be able to do to progress this particular victory path that I'm doing? But you don't just have to do that one. It also shows all of the other ones, and you can kind of dip and dive into the other ones as you see fit or as you're able to. And actually, I think I would recommend doing so rather than just super focusing on one of them. Because as you do these victory conditions, you end up gaining these skill points that you can put into a tree. And each of the trees have like different specialization. There's the economic tree and the domination tree and the scientific tree. And by getting those skill points, you're getting passive bonuses for the rest of the game, even after you've changed ages. And it's really, really powerful. And then on top of that, based on what you're able to accomplish through that, like the first age, for example. Going into the exploration age, you'll gain additional bonuses on that, which really, really helps you boost into that particular age and then into the following one if you're able to complete the next set of objectives as you go through. And the thing that I like about this system the most, and the thing that actually I may like about this game particularly the most, is this system of being able to quickly click on the menu if I need to, and at a glance see where I stand, but also just have it pinned in the corner of the screen of like, what am I trying to achieve? And being able to very clearly see what I need to do to achieve that particular victory. And I really like that. I think that that's a huge improvement. In previous Civ games, you could see where you were at, kind of, depending on what it was. And like, let's say it was a scientific victory in Civ 6. It was like, you needed to do the space race thing and get all to that point. But man, to get to that point, you had to get to the modern age. And so you were really just fighting to get science at that point, as much science per turn as possible, just to blast through the tree. And there was very little spots along the way that you were like checking, like, yes, I see where I'm at in this victory condition, and yes, I'm doing well. There are some exceptions to that. I think the religious victory in Civ 6, when they added the religious stuff, all what did they call the expansion? I remember it wasn't Rise and Fall. That was the one after that. It was like Gods and Kings. I think that's what it was. And you were able to do a religious victory. And when they added that, you could see like how far along you were. And it was really nice. But the other victory conditions didn't really have that as a easy to follow thing of what you should be doing moment to moment within the game. And with this new system, it does do that. It does hold your hand a little bit because they're trying to bring new people in. In fact, this is the first Civilization that's launching day and date on PC and console, on all consoles, and that's really impressive. But that means that they're going to have a huge new audience coming in, which is a good thing. And the fact that they have this new system to be able to be like, yo, you can see what you need to do at any given point within the game and start working your way towards that thing. So that way you know what to be doing moment to moment. It helps guide new players along. It helps guide old players along that have been playing Civ for a while. And it allows you to very quickly, at a glance, kind of see where the standings are. And I really like that. But as we talked about earlier, that system directly ties into the ages and how the different ages switch. But when the ages switch, it's not just like, oh, I have a new civilization that I'm playing as. It's more complicated than that. It's more like cities that you had before might now not be a city. It might be considered a town. There's a distinction between a settlement, a town, and a city now. And when you switch ages, the cities that you had before may not be the cities that you have now. Some of them may have turned into towns, which means they're basically just turning all of their production into gold for you per turn, and you can't build things in those cities unless you use gold to do it. You don't have like direct access of like making a production thing for that city, or sorry, for that town. But there's a whole complicated thing of why that's good and when to switch from a town to a city, because you as it grows, it becomes cheaper to buy it, where you turn it from a town to a city, and then you have full control over the production queue and everything. There's a lot of kind of complicated stuff going on there, and I'm not going to get into that in this video. You just need to know that they have a distinction now, and that includes with city-states and the mechanic of using influence. Influence is a resource that you're gathering throughout this game, and when you start the game, there'll be like independent cities around, which we've used to, like in Civ 5 and 6, called city-states and whatnot. But now these things, which do become city-states, you can spend influence on them to turn them onto your side. And it's like it's a slow build, and other players are able to influence that by using their influence, by purchasing more of it than you as you go. And this actually kind of replaces barb camps from the previous games, which is kind of cool because, yeah, some of them are hostile to you. They'll be red. You're like, oh, that one's a hostile to me. And if you have enough influence right off the bat, you can click on it and start trying to turn them to your friends. And eventually, maybe into one of your cities, you buy influence over them. using influence. And then you can turn that into one of your cities. And it's this cool little thing where you're slowly expanding the empire if you want to, by purchasing them using influence. But because of how that system works, because of how the ages system works, it's this really complicated thing of going from one age to another. The game changes. They are very distinctive like ways to play as you go from the antiquity age to the exploration age. Because when you hit the exploration age, you're no longer just kind of worrying about your little continent because you can't get off, because you can't go into the deep ocean and whatnot. Suddenly, the game opens up and there is an entire other continent to go explore, just like there would be, you know, in the exploration age of human history, where you're getting into boats and sailing across the ocean. But you're racing the other civilizations to get there, and there will be PC guys on the other one, so you can like conquer them or you can befriend them, and there's all sorts of different things you can do there. But there are resources on the second continent that are good for you, that you want to get, because they are things like spices and whatnot that you don't have on your continent. And if you're playing an economic victory like I was, you want to ship those things back. You want to get control of them and ship them back in order to make money off of them, and eventually you create treasure fleets that you have to protect as they go from one side of the world to the other and dropping the stuff off. And it's like this cool trade route system, and I really liked that. But it was completely different than what I was playing in the antiquity age. And likewise, going from antiquity, or going from exploration to the modern age, I suddenly, in my economic victory, was needing to make a railroad like empire, where I had to build railroad stations at all of my cities. And then that was starting to ship all of those resources that I got from the exploration age, like chocolate and cotton and what was some other ones? I don't know, sugar, stuff like that. I was shipping that from my different cities using the railways, and then I needed to make factories in all of those cities to process them. So now I have this giant like processing center going on, and I'm creating this trade network between my cities, and anything that wasn't connected by a railroad because they were off on an island or a different continent, you had to have like a port for those railways to continue their trade route. And by doing that, I'm gaining these points to try to get towards the end of the game as I'm creating this empire of money. And it really worked, because I was making at least quadruple the amount of gold any other player in the game was. And that was fun. It was really cool to be able to have that experience. But likewise, the same thing happens with the other victory conditions. The dominance one is a little interesting because a lot of it is just like capture more cities. But that's kind of always been the case. I feel like there could be a little bit more there. And there is. I shouldn't downplay it too much. I think there is a lot of little bits of extra gameplay there that there weren't in the past. It is a little bit more nuanced. But, you know, when it comes to like the difference between that and the economic one, it's like night and day. And then the space one, where you're trying to essentially get to space, is very similar, but it's a little bit better laid out. It's like, yeah, you're trying to get to these different techs because you're trying to, I don't know, like when you get to the modern age, it's like, yeah, you need to get aerodynamics because you need to be able to get aircraft, and you need to do a full like flight around the globe, and then you need to break the sound barrier, and then you need to, you know, get into space. And it's like this, it's the normal progression. But in the antiquity age and in the exploration age, you don't have that space stuff, right? So it's a lot of like, get this particular tech and then learn how to do this thing and get not an observation post, but there's like, get things that are scientific based, like on your in your city. Oh, and speaking of cities, that's a whole different way that they work too. I mean, I don't have time to go into all of the little details here, but just overview of how cities work and how different they are. Think Civilization 6, where you put down districts, and based on putting the district down next to another district, it would get a bonus, like an adjacency bonus. It's kind of like that. except it's not, because in those districts that you would build in Civ 6, you would then build all your buildings. So you built your trade district, and then suddenly that's where you would build your market and your whatever, your ports and stuff like that, and you would get the extra money based on the extra buildings that you built there. It's not like that. It's a lot more decoupled. It's more like, you know, you've got for the money thing, it's like you got a guild hall that you're going to put down on a tile, and that tile can share spaces with another building, and it just depends on what kind of tile it is. Is it like a rural tile? Is it a like a city tile that has things on it that kind of are more city based, or is it like a farm, you know, where you've got a farm and then like a warehouse and stuff like that? It's really interesting because the bonuses you get for putting things down on the tiles, pairing them together, you have to be on the lookout for, because they can be massive, and you can get an incredibly powerful city going if you're putting things down in the right places and getting the adjacency bonuses. But it's a lot more nuanced than doing it as in Civilization 6 with the districts. It also looks a lot cooler because your city is like constantly changing, and they've done a clever thing with the art where when you build one type of building in a hex and you build a second type of building in that hex, it pairs them up in a really cool, clever way that you can see them. So when you zoom in, they look really cool. Unfortunately, it also means that when you get to the end of the game, it's just a massive crap on your screen. It's just visual overload, and it's kind of unfortunate. But after playing all the way through on standard speed, which is kind of slow, from start to finish on a game, I would say that I came around on the idea of the different ages. I actually kind of like it now. Do I like it more than like Civilization 5? I don't know, because I've played one whole game. That's a lot of time. It's about 15 to 20 hours. I don't remember exactly the time count on that. Some of that was me just sitting in menus as I was dealing with kids and whatnot. But yeah, it's a long one, and I've put a lot of time into this game. And after making it through one, I'm like, you know what? I have changed my mind. I was really, really, really against it, and now I'm like, I kind of liked it. That was kind of fun. But how much of that is that the victory conditions are more clear, and what you should be doing moment to moment is more clear? I don't know. I think that plays a big part of it. But the fact that you do get these very distinct, different play styles in every age, and suddenly the game shifts into a different thing, it means that if you're playing multiplayer, some people are going to be really good at certain ages because they know how to extract certain stuff out of those ages, how to get really good with different victory conditions, or how to pivot. Like, that's the big part, is you can just pivot victory conditions. You're like, yeah, you know what? I was going scientific, but it's very clear that the way that I started, the area that I started at, is not benefiting me in that way. In fact, I got attacked by another player right off the bat. Now I have this huge army, and so I took, all of these other cities of a different adjacent player, and now they all kind of want to fight back, but they don't really want to, because we're about to change ages. And by the way, when you change ages, you lose a lot of your units, basically everything, and it refreshes, and that's a whole other annoying thing where you don't get to be that cool player with the scientific victory where, like, people are like, they've got their sailboats, and you're like, I have a freaking destroyer. I have a modern age destroyer, and I'm the only one with oil in the game, and I'm the only one with uranium. It's not really like that. It kind of trails the other people along, because when you switch ages, everybody starts at the same point on the trees, even if you were making way more than everybody else. Now, if there's a thing to that, where if you get to the quote-unquote future tech or future civics, and you do that enough times, you actually gain bonuses to your tree, so you get further in at the beginning of an age. But I'm not discussing that here because I don't think that that's relevant. But playing a multiplayer game is really interesting from switching from one age to another, because you can pivot. You can change your victory condition based on how the game is going, and I really like that. I think that that's a cool addition, and I think that's the best part of the new age system. Is in multiplayer, it will be interesting to see how players play through the ages. But in a single player game, you can do the same thing. It just is less of an interesting choice, because typically I think you'll stick to whatever you were doing before. And finally, I want to talk about my gripes with the game. First and foremost, the UI is pretty crappy, but I'm not gonna harp on that because I feel like it is obviously bad. It's really hard to figure things out at first of where things are. It's hard to read things. The way that they've laid things out is just obtuse. It doesn't make any sense. And the UI sucks. It just sucks. But that's also something that's pretty easy to fix, and I'm expecting them to fix it. So because of the way that this game seems to be playing out with how they're going to be doing updates, potentially, we'll talk about that in a second, it seems like this will get fixed fairly quickly. So I'm not gonna ding it for it having a bad UI, because that will be fixed. If you're looking at the game, you're like, I don't really care about the UI, then sure, then it's not gonna bother you. But if you're looking at it, you're like, oh my goodness, it's so bad, then yes it is, and yes, you will be bothered by it, and maybe wait a couple months before you pick the game up. And the UI isn't the only thing that I hate about the game. Actually, the biggest thing that I actually actively hate is the way the player models look. I don't know why they did this weird thing with them. They just look bad. Like, I really liked, I know a lot of people didn't, and I'm gonna get flack for this, but I really liked the more like cartoony Pixar-esque character models for leaders in Civ 6. I think it worked really well, and they were able to exemplify whatever that leader's like personality was, because they could overdo it and it looked right because it was very Pixar-y. But in this case, it's not. It's very realistic, and they're way beyond the level of the uncanny valley. They just look so gross and weird, and I don't like it at all. I actively hate them, and that's a bad thing for a game that actually, for the rest of the game, is so beautiful. The way that they've designed the world and how the hexes look and interact with each other is freaking phenomenal. And then you have this glaring issue of the character models being terrible, and I really do hate that. And the final thing I don't like, maybe, I'm not sure yet, I'm undecided on it, is how they've set the game up for the future. Because I'm afraid they're going to try to do like a live service type thing. I mean, they kind of tried that with the end of Civilization 6, having like the season pass where you would get like a bunch of expansion packs, or rather Civ packs, and there would be things that you could do in that. It was kind of weird. It felt kind of ick to me, and I wasn't happy about that for the end of Civilization 6. But in past Civ games, it would just be like, yeah, you're gonna get 1, 2, maybe 3 expansions if you're lucky, and those things will drastically change the game. And usually the game launches in a state where it's like, it's okay, it's not as good as the previous game, so just play the previous game until the first expansion comes out, and then that's probably the jumping off point for a lot of people to start. And then the second one comes out, and it's like, yeah, now it's officially better than the previous game, and that's how it's been in the past, and that doesn't seem to be necessarily how they're doing it now. And what I point to that here, now they may still do expansions, right? Don't hear that. What I want you to hear is that they have this really weird choice of a system that carries progression over from game to game. What I mean by that is when you play through a game, you're going to be getting experience for doing random stuff. Maybe it's your first time going through a victory for economics or for a scientific victory. You're going to be completing a bunch of objectives, and those objectives are actually gaining your account experience. And as your account levels up, specifically with the person that you're playing as, so in my case, in the game in the background, Xerxes, I was playing through as him, and as I was leveling up my account, I was also leveling up the persona for him, and I was unlocking things that the next time I play, I will gain bonuses for playing him again. So the players, this is typically bad in a multiplayer experience. This is, if it carries over, I'm unsure of this, so don't hold me to this one, but if a player has put 100 hours into Xerxes and then has all of the unlocks for him to make him a lot better at the beginning of the game, they're just going to dominate, right? They're just going to be way better. On top of knowing how to play that person, they're also just going to have natural unlocks for it, and I don't like that, particularly for multiplayer stuff. Now, for the vast majority of people who play Civ, that's not going to matter because they're going to play against the computer and they're just going to be leveling up their civilization person, and maybe they really like playing as a particular character and they're just going to keep doing that one over and over, and that's cool for them. Then that's fine. But if that carries over into multiplayer, that's like really, really game breaking. But then this is a weird thing, and then your account, because it has experience, is leveling up, you're unlocking like the icons on your little account and your banner. You're unlocking different banners and different frames and stuff. It's like you're leveling up in Overwatch or something like that, and you're like unlocking all these cosmetic things for your account that you're showing off if you're playing in multiplayer. And I'm not keen on that, and kind of feels like maybe they'll add some kind of season pass that expands on that stuff as you're playing. Maybe the first expansion will have a season pass, and if you complete certain things before the next expansion comes out, you unlock like all of the, and maybe it'll be like a paid tier. I'm afraid of that because I don't want that in a Civ game. Civ for me is not necessarily a game that I play all the time. It is games that I get the itch to play, and then I play it religiously for like a week, and then I put it down after I've spent 100 hours and I'm wandering around my house wondering where all that time has gone because the time vampire has stole it. Like that, I don't want a game that continuously tries to get me back into it. Also, that's a weird thing because like I'm not planning on purchasing any cosmetic stuff for the game if it's available. I'd rather just have things in the game that I can get and immediately play with and not feel like I'm missing out on something. Like I want to be able to buy new civilizations. I hope those packs come out. I want to be able to buy a new expansion and add a bunch of new features to the game that they're not just going to update constantly. On the flip side of things, maybe they just update the game constantly, and in a couple months we have like a really different version of the game because all of the feedback that has come in makes them adjust things and fix things and redo the UI, and they're able to do that because they're putting out constant game packs to pay for that development time. I don't know, but it feels weird, and I just needed to get that out there that I'm not sure how I stand on it yet. So, to summarize everything, this is already a long video. It's always gonna be because we're talking about a very complicated game. To summarize my thoughts, I didn't like what they showed off when they first announced the game, but after playing a whole game of it, I've come around on it. I actually really like it. I think it's cool, and it has a lot of potential to be even cooler. I don't like the UI, and I don't like some of the art stuff that they've chosen, but the UI, it could change. It could change pretty quickly, so I'm not like, I'm not going to say don't buy the game. Absolutely not, because that thing is going to change and it'll get better, or better yet, someone will mod it and then you'll have a mod for it in like 2 weeks and it'll be fixed anyways. And then on top of that, I'm unsure about this whole like potential that they've set up for like long-term service of the game and how much money they may try to eke out from us, especially from a game that's already expensive. I don't know. It just feels kind of weird, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. So I'm in a place right now where I'm enjoying Civ 7. I'm gonna go ahead and say I'm actually enjoying Civ 7 more than Civ 6 and just about as much as Civ 5, which is it's a good spot to be in. But would I recommend it to people? No. I would say that you need to make your own decision on that based on what you've seen in this video and what you see from other people. Like, is it a game that is going to bother you if the UI is bad, or it maybe the different ages thing, is that something that actually bothers you? I would say you'll know by the end of this video whether or not you're ready to pick up the game, and that is what it is. But I'm not going to personally recommend it because I think that some things are very divisive for certain people, and personally I'm having fun with it, but that doesn't mean that you're going to. And it's a weird place to be in with a Civ game, but at the same time, it's also familiar because that seems to be the case with all Civ launches, and that's kind of what I expected. But maybe I'm enjoying the game more than I would because I had such low expectations going into it, and now I'm pleasantly surprised that I like the ages system and I want to see what they do with it in the future. We have the foundations for cool things in the game. There are natural disasters. There's volcanoes going off. There's floods happening. There is a religious aspect to it. You can make your religion and you can spread it with missionaries and whatnot. but there is no victory condition for that yet, specifically for that yet. And there's also not really like any expanded upon things when it comes to the natural disasters. Although I will say something really cool happened in the exploration age with me, which was a plague broke out and it was spreading between everybody's civilization, and you had to get like doctors and physicians to like go and cure it. And it was really cool. It kind of reminded me of the scenario, the plague, the Black Plague scenario from Civ 6. And I want to see more stuff like that. And I feel like that is a foundation that they've set in the game for crisis stuff, which is what they call it. And I want to see more of that. And I'm expecting the first expansion to kind of play out with that kind of stuff and just give us more options in the game, just like they always do. And so personally, from that aspect, I can see a way forward with this game where it gets really good really quickly. It just depends on how quick they're able to actually put the stuff out, and will people stick around to keep playing the game if they don't feel like there's enough there for them. I don't know. I will say that the amount of civilizations there are feels a little weird. There's not a lot in there, but it's because it's broken up between 3 ages. You don't get to play modern day civilizations until you hit the modern age for a lot of these things, and you have to unlock those while you're playing by doing certain things within the game to make it so that you can play those civilizations, which I actually kind of like. But I am honestly really curious about what you guys think of this game. Let me know in the comments. Like, I want to have a discussion on this. I think it's interesting. It's a cool game. It's a cool idea, but whether or not everybody is on board with it, that's a whole different thing, right? So let's have that discussion. Let me know what you think of it. Are you going to pick it up or not? If you want to see more videos like this, I upload daily, so make sure to subscribe and like the video. It helps out the channel a lot. Also, you can become like a channel member too, but I don't expect people who are just clicking on a Civ video to necessarily want to dive into a bunch of other random videos that I do on the channel. But with all that being said, thank you very much for watching, and we shall see you all next time.